Hey everyone, welcome back to Dallas Cowboys coverage. We are now less than a day away from roster cutdown day. Obviously, it's been an eventful preseason, and now it's time to make the cuts. Obviously, always a tough situation, but specifically this year, the Cowboys have so much depth, and to get this 90-man roster all the way down to 53, it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a crazy day tomorrow. So, just want to break down, obviously, everything that's gone down in the preseason, some of the top performers who I expect to be on the bubble tomorrow, and just, going to break that down. Obviously, we'll see some surprises, but I'm just going to kind of go position by position. I'll talk about who I think is going to make it, who I think, maybe not. So, let's get right into it. The first thing I wanted to talk about was how about the running backs? I mean, Deuce Vaughn, what a show he put on in the preseason. Obviously, a late round pick, but he might be your running back too, going into the season. Obviously, a bit of a different player, but he really showed out all preseason. So really good to see that. Obviously, Zeke, as much as I'm sad to see him go, it is nice to get closure. Obviously, if you hadn't heard, he signed the 1-year deal with the New England Patriots. So now the Cowboys, you're set here. You have, some running backs to work with, and it's going to be interesting to see who they go with. Obviously, there's a numbers game there, as there is at every position, particularly this season. There's a lot of guys who are capable of making this roster. The Joneses have said, they feel like they have 60 plus NFL players, and you got to get that down to 53. So it's going to be a challenge for sure. So with running backs, I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously Pollard's a lock, Deuce is a lock at this point. And then from there, it's interesting. I think Dowdle probably did enough to make this team. He had a pretty strong preseason. But I think one of the more disappointing players of the preseason has got to be Malik Davis. He's your running back 3 last year with Zeke here. I think he really looked good for most of the season when he got those opportunities, but really just struggled this preseason. Really, never quite got going. His yards per carry were really low. So just because of the great performances you saw from other guys, I question whether he makes his team. It's going to be close. I'm sure he'll probably be back on the practice squad if he does indeed get waived, but it's going to be interesting. Obviously, you have those 3. Ronald Jones is another one. I think, obviously, he's suspended for the first 2 games of the season, so I think they'll go ahead and just put him on that reserve suspended list and, make a decision 2 weeks in. I'm not sure if he makes his team once it comes down to it, but we'll see. And then one more is Hunter Lipke, the running back, fullback type of player. He really hasn't played a lot of fullback. I was really wishing that they'd kind of experiment with him more in that spot, because the Cowboys really haven't had a true fullback since Jameis Olawale, but it seems like they did not really go that route. He didn't play a whole lot in the preseason until this last Raiders game, where he had a really nice performance. He was, running over people, getting some short catches. The effort was there, and it was really exciting to see him, and I'd love to see him make this team, but obviously it's a numbers game. We'll see, but I do think he's definitely a practice squad option at the least. So in addition to that, I'm just going to switch over to tight end, and then we'll come back to quarterback and receivers. You're kind of in a similar situation in terms of the back end of that. Sean McEwen has kind of filled in that H-back, fullback type of role. We saw him sort of fill that out some of last season and in this preseason. The Cowboys like 4 tight ends. They like that H-back option. And to me, it's going to come down to whether they keep McEwen in that role or if they turn to Hunter Lipke to be that. I'm not sure what the decision's going to be there. Obviously, Lipke, I think, was a bit more impressive. McEwen, I didn't see too much from him. Obviously, not asked to do so much either, but it'll be interesting. I think, if it's me, it's Ferguson, obviously Schoonmaker, and I think Hendershot. I think they all make this team pretty easily. I think, obviously they're the 3 tight ends, but if it's me, I'm not carrying a 4th this year just because I want to allot that to other places around the roster. But we'll see what the Cowboys do. I think Lipke versus McEwen is going to be an interesting one to watch. One of them makes the team. One of them I think does get cut. So that'll definitely be interesting. And then quarterback, some more breaking news there. Obviously, Trey Lance comes over in a shocking deal to me. I was absolutely shocked to hear that news. I thought it was fake at first, but then I saw it was ESPN reporting it, so I was like, okay, this is real. Really, I don't know. I don't love the trade. I don't hate it either. I like the idea of a developmental guy, but I guess I don't love the fact that it was done sort of, under the table. I wish I wish they'd consulted Dak and Mike McCarthy in the offense instead of just kind of jumping in and making it happen. I just thought it was kind of abrupt, a bit strange. I think the Joneses love their attention, and they sure got it here. So Trey Lance, it's interesting. For sure. This is a number 3 overall pick just 2 years ago, and an interesting fact, if you didn't know, one of the picks that was traded, the 49ers traded it to the Dolphins, who then traded it to the Eagles, who then traded it to the Cowboys. That ended up being the number 12 pick in the 2021 draft, Micah Parsons. So just a little bit of context there, just of how much the 49ers gave up to get Trey Lance. 3 first-round picks, and, one of those turned into Micah Parsons. The Dolphins, one of them turned into Jalen Waddle. One of them was traded and turned into Bradley Chubb. Tyreek Hill was part of the trade too. There was so much going on in that trade because with the Dolphins, the Eagles, and even the Cowboys involved second-handedly, there's an immense amount of talent that was distributed around because of that trade, and all the 49ers got out of it is Trey Lance, who they now 2 years later have given up on and sent to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. So absolutely, down bad for the 49ers. They probably going to go down as one of the worst draft day trades in NFL history, unfortunately for them. Fortunately for the Cowboys, though, it only costed them a 4th-round pick. So, it's hard to be mad about that, but just with the value in the NFL today, I mean, Isaiah Simmons got traded to the Giants for a 7th-round pick, and I think I would have been more excited about that trade just in the fact that you need a linebacker, someone developmental like that, and it's only a 7th. So a 4th is, it's not a lot, but in today's NFL trade market, it's not exactly cheap either, especially for a player like Lance who really hasn't done a whole lot in his career. But obviously, the potential is there, the traits are there, so it's hard to be really upset. But 4th-round picks, they can be Dak, or they can be Charles Tapper. They can be, someone who gets cut a year later. They could be a franchise quarterback. So it's really hard to speculate on that 4th-round pick, but I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how Trey Lance fills in here. Obviously, he's not replacing Dak. I don't even think he's replacing Cooper Rush at this point. But unfortunately, he is probably knocking Will Grier off this team. So, I can go more in depth about Trey Lance, obviously, maybe in a future video. But for now, he's on this team. I hope that Dak and the Cowboys, and I know he will, take him under his wing. Hopefully he can develop into a solid backup, and who knows, maybe the Cowboys flip him in a future trade. It's just, to me, it's an interesting situation. I'm not mad about it, but I honestly wish that they would have maybe taken that 4th-round pick or even a later pick and focus more on offensive line depth or linebacker depth rather than a 3rd-string quarterback. Obviously, it's it's going to make more headlines, but I don't love the trade. Don't hate it either. We'll see how it works out. But anyway, Dak's on this team. Cooper Rush is on this team. Will Grier, unfortunately, had his legacy game against the Raiders. He was incredible. Got to give a shout out to Dak, too. He called a heck of a game. I'm starting to wonder if maybe he should just be offensive coordinator. But Will Grier, I'm glad the Cowboys at least gave him the opportunity to show out and, do his thing. And he had an incredible game. I wish he had played like that all preseason. The Cowboys, and then they probably wouldn't have even needed to make this trade. But unfortunately for him, I think that is probably the last game he plays in a Cowboys uniform. I think he'll be pretty quickly scooped up by another team. I know it's hard for me to see him go after that performance. I wish they would, maybe just sneak him onto the practice squad or something. But I think I can pretty confidently say you have your 3 quarterbacks, and that's probably going to be it. Will Grier, unfortunately, will probably be having to find a home elsewhere. So we're already at 9 minutes here. I know this is going to be a longer video. I apologize for that, but I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. So onto the receivers. You have your locks, obviously. So CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup. Jalen Tolbert is now a lock too. He's one of my top preseason performers. I think he's right up there. He really has put in the work this offseason. I'm very impressed of everything he's done to really step into the wide receiver 4 role after a, admittedly disappointing rookie year. I'm really excited to see what he can do in year 2, and I look for him to be one of the top breakout candidates on this Cowboys team. So he's QB4, and then now that's when it gets a little complicated. I think this team's probably going to carry 5, I would say 6 wide receivers if you count Kevontae Turpin. Obviously, he had the rough one preseason outing with the muff punt. I really wish they had let him do a little more in the wide receiver realm during the preseason, but I still think he makes his team. I think, he would be probably one of the bigger surprise cut candidates, but if I'm guessing, I do think, he stays on this team. He was a Pro Bowler last year, obviously. I think some of it might be coming from that one incredible preseason game. I really hope he can kind of sort of bounce back into just kind of regain that form in his returning. He's been a little shaky as of late, so hopefully he can bounce back. Either way, I think he's on this team. And then it gets a little bit complicated. I think Jalen Brooks and Simi Fehoko is the main wide receiver battle. We saw Dontario Drummond have a good game, among others. I'm not going to name them all because there's a lot of UDFAs and other receivers in there. Tyron Billy Johnson put himself out there for sure in that last game. But I think it's going to be Jalen Brooks. He was drafted. The Cowboys love their draft picks. You rarely see them get cut. So I think he's going to be that last role. I think Simi Fehoko and others end up on the practice squad because obviously it is a numbers game, but I think they do go ahead and go with 6 wide receivers there. So onto the offensive line, I think you have a great solid starting 5. Obviously, Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, Zach Martin. Thank goodness he's back. I'm so happy they figured that out. And Terrence Steele. I think that's obviously a great starting 5, but unfortunately, with this line I think it's not a matter of if we see an injury, but when, especially in terms of Tyron Smith. I love him to death, but unfortunately, injuries have been the story, at least recently in his career. So I don't love the depth you have. I think Assam Richards, he had an awesome preseason. I think he was really good. He really certainly played his way onto this team, and he's it's an interesting spot for him. He has some tackle experience, some guard experience, but do you trust him to fill in for Tyler or Tyron Smith if there's an injury? Not quite sure. I wish that they would get a little more depth, but from that standpoint, I think he's one of your stronger backup options. Matt Waletzko had a bit of a shoulder issue. I think he probably makes his team though. Again, they don't have the best options. Matt Farniak, not the best preseason. I think he also makes the team though. Chuma Edoga obviously suffered that injury in practice. Didn't really hear the full extent of that. Didn't play again in the preseason. I wonder if he's going to be kind of a early IR stash. Maybe he goes on there for the first 4 weeks, make a decision after that. We'll see. But he's in an interesting spot. Tyler Bass, an undrafted free agent, had a pretty solid preseason. I think maybe he plays his way onto this team. The Cowboys, they've said they want to carry 9, 10 offensive linemen. I just wish they had some better quality in there, honestly. Josh Ball, kind of a similar situation with Waletzko. His injury is a bit more serious, though. I think he probably does start the season on injured reserve, and so he's, probably not going to... So he'll make his way onto this team, I think, as well. So it's an interesting numbers game there. You have Alex Taylor. He played solid, and maybe he makes his team. There's a lot of questions around the offensive line, and still... as many guys as I think could make it, I still wish you really had that reliable swing tackle. I'd even argue you might bring back Jason Peters just for his left tackle, right tackle, and left guard flexibility. He can move inside and out all around. Just his veteran presence and just a slightly more reliable option. I'd love for them to bring him back. Not sure if that happens, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the O-line. So. And then one more thing I wanted to say is I was talking about those IR stashes. Don't be surprised if you see some roster gymnastics tomorrow. There's going to be, a lot of people don't realize how much goes into the roster cuts. It's not just, in Madden where you cut these players, put some on the practice squad, and that's it. Obviously, there's a lot more to it because of waivers and stuff like that. So, a lot of these guys, they're going to be wanting to get onto the practice squad, but they're just hoping that another team doesn't scoop them up and add them in waivers. So that's, that's obviously a fine line, a sort of a balancing act, always trying to, keep your best players, sneak some onto the practice squad. But it's, it's always a challenge because other teams, they see talent and they're interested too. So I don't be surprised if you see someone like maybe Cooper Rush, maybe Trent Sieg, maybe CJ Goodwin, some of these vested veterans getting cut tomorrow. That's really just a veteran roster move. What they'll do is they'll cut them for like 5 minutes. They'll move someone like Josh Ball, maybe Peyton Hendershot onto injured reserve, and then they'll immediately re-sign them. So don't freak out. There might be some surprise roster cuts, but if it's a veteran like CJ Goodwin, Cooper Rush, most likely what's going to happen is they'll just be brought back immediately just so they can move someone onto injured reserve, and then of course they don't take up a spot, so then you can bring them back with that free spot you just opened up. So it's a bit complicated. There's going to be a lot going on tomorrow, but just don't freak out if you see one of your favorite veterans getting cut. They'll probably be back pretty soon. So on to the defense. I can't believe that was just the offense. There's so much to talk about here. I'm going to start with edge. Obviously, you have your locks: Micah Parsons, Demarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong. I think Dante Fowler makes his team pretty easily. I wouldn't call him quite a lock since he did get some playing time in the preseason, but I think he's on there. And then you have some question marks. Vilami Fehoko, I think he makes his team just because he was a fourth-round pick. Cowboys don't typically cut their fourth-round picks. So we'll see from that standpoint. Didn't do a whole lot, but I think he does make this team. Ben Banogu actually was cut this evening. There were a few roster cuts. I'll mention that as well. I just remembered he was released. Seth Green, a backup practice squad tight end, he was also waived as well. And Alec Lindstrom, he's one of your backup centers. He was also waived. So only 3 guys so far. It's going to be a busy day tomorrow, so just wanted to throw those guys out there real quick. And then continuing with the edge rushers, that's kind of where you are. Tyrus Wheat, he had a pretty solid preseason. I'm not sure. Once again, though, just with the numbers game, some of these guys, I think, deserve to make this team, but just there's so many spots, not so many spots to go around. So it's going to be interesting. Again, just hoping you can get some of these guys onto the practice squad. Moving into the interior, I think this is where it gets even more complicated. Mozzie's on this team. Jonathan Hankins makes this team. Oso Digizua makes this team. To me, those are the only 3 locks at defensive tackle. Chauncey Golston has some interior and edge flexibility. I think he probably makes this roster because of that. So I think that's probably another one there. And then you have these guys like Neville Gallimore. Obviously, a 3rd-round pick back in 2020. I had really high hopes for him. Obviously, hasn't quite panned out. He had a pretty solid preseason. I'll give him credit for that. But once again, it's a numbers game. I was thinking he would make this team for sure. But then I was really looking at the roster, breaking it down, and it's like, man, with the spots available, who knows? Maybe he doesn't quite make it on. So it's going to be interesting there. I think that's one of your more high-profile, big-name guys that could be cut. Same thing with Quinton Bohanna, obviously a later round pick from a year after Gallimore. But he's kind of in that similar boat. He's big guy, nose tackle. I think Jonathan Hankins kind of took his role a little bit, and now with Mozzie coming in, maybe you sneak him onto the practice squad, but once again, with the numbers, I don't think there's going to be space for him on this team. I'll mention Isaac Alarcon, obviously switched from offensive line to defensive line. He'll be on the practice squad as part of the International Player Pathway Program. So for fans of him, don't worry, he's not going anywhere. So on to linebackers. This is an interesting spot. Much like the offensive line, it's going to be interesting to see who gets kept, who gets cut. But once again, I have some concerns about depth. I think this is a spot where maybe you go out and sign a Anthony Barr type of player. I'm not saying Anthony Barr, but just a veteran. Maybe you trade for a guy because you're thin at linebacker, and especially with Leighton Vander Esch's injury problems in the past, I don't love where this linebacker core is going into the season. Micah Parsons, I think, is really going to be primarily an edge rusher this year. He'll play some linebacker, but I don't exactly expect to see him as just a true stand-up linebacker very often. Some packages, but I wouldn't really count on that to be his role. So you have Leighton Vander Esch and you have Damone Clark. Those are your 2 starters. Obviously, the way the Cowboys do it, they kind of like their big nickel package where they have 3 safeties, 2 linebackers on the field. So obviously Donovan Wilson, Jaron Kearse, they're going to be playing in the box some, so that kind of counts as your 3rd linebacker per se. But just a true linebackers, it's Damone Clark and it's Leighton Vander Esch. Jabril Cox, he's been rumored to be on the roster bubble. I think he makes it just because you need a third linebacker. But obviously Devin Harper's there as well. Rumors he might beat him out for that spot. I would think maybe they both make it. I would, prefer to keep 4 linebackers, but maybe there's another roster move coming. He's not quite safe, so that'll definitely be an interesting spot to look at, see what happens there. And then now on to the secondary, where I think is probably your deepest position on the entire roster. So I'm going to start with cornerbacks. Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore, Deron Bland, I think are your 3 starters. Deron Bland, such an excellent rookie year. I can't say enough good things about him. He's going to be your starting nickel. And then Jordan Lewis, he's sort of in an interesting spot. On the PUP list currently, it'll be interesting to see if they activate him. If they do, obviously, he has to take up a spot. If they don't, then he does have to miss the first 4 weeks of the season. So we'll see what they do here. I think he's another one of those very surprise cut candidates. I don't think he gets cut, but obviously with Bland kind of taking over that nickel role, I'd still like Jordan Lewis to make the team because he can really be a reliable backup. I've really liked him throughout his career, but you never know. It's a numbers game. We'll see. So beyond him, Kelvin Joseph, tough. Another disappointing earlier round pick, a second rounder there. He had a solid preseason. I think he was pretty good overall, but once again, the numbers game. I think he's a great special teamer, but once again, it's like you have guys that can fill that role. You obviously wanted to see more from him. I still don't think he gets cut, but you never know. We'll see. He's once again one of those guys from the 2021 draft who's just not quite safe. 2022 draft, excuse me. But we'll see. Nashawn Wright, same boat. He was a 3rd round pick in that draft. I never liked that draft pick. No disrespect to Nashawn Wright. I just think he was drafted a bit too early. I don't think he makes this team, honestly. Once again, numbers game. You have so many cornerbacks, not so many spots. So I think he comes back on the practice squad, but for now, I don't think he's on this team. CJ Goodwin, I think, he's your core special teamer, a captain on this team. I think he's proved too valuable, and I love him personally, so I think he does make this team. But, you never know. We'll see. So, I think that's kind of your main guys at nickel. At cornerback. So, obviously there's still some question marks. Eric Scott Jr. is one more. Almost left him off. He's, again, another interesting situation. He's a 6th round pick. Not on a lot of guys' radar, but Dan Quinn liked him. He was drafted for a reason, and he had a pretty solid preseason. I think he makes this team. And once again, we have a lot of cornerbacks now that I said I think make this team. So, obviously, something's got to give. It's going to be interesting, and buckle up. It's going to be a busy day tomorrow. And then, if cornerback isn't deep enough, I think safety is even deeper. Jaron Kearse, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, your 3 locked-in safeties without a doubt. They'll all be playing very frequently. They're all going to be starters on this team. Dan Quinn will make that work. Beyond them, though, Israel Mukuamu, I think, makes his team. Wanye Thomas, incredible preseason, incredible offseason. He's probably maybe the player of the offseason for me. Such a great performance by him all throughout. He makes his team. Marquise Bell, I think, is interesting. I think I would like him to make this team. I think a lot of people would. But once again, this numbers game, if it's me, I'm afraid he might be another one of these odd men out. So hopefully you can get him back onto the practice squad if he doesn't make it. But once again, this team loves their safeties. He's certainly capable and deserving of making this team. But once again, we'll see. And then beyond them, I think it's going to be pretty tough. Sheldrick Redwine, I don't think he makes this team. Tyler Coyle, again, I think he's deserving. I think he's probably going to be on the practice squad. But again, it's just so much depth, so many options, so little spots. So we'll see what happens. And then on to the specialists. Brandon Aubrey, I think, is really going to be, he's your kicker, as whether we like it or not. Let me know in the comments. I haven't said much of that today, but let me know, obviously, all around this roster, who you think should make the team, who you think shouldn't make the team, who you think might be a surprise cut candidate. Let me know. Whatever you want to talk about, I'll answer you for sure in the comments. But Brandon Aubrey, let me know your confidence level in him. Rate me on a scale of 1 to 100 if you like. What are you thinking on him? I think, obviously, the former soccer player, local kid, he has a heck of a leg. But unfortunately for me, as as much as I want to buy into him, he reminds me so much of 2019 Brett Maher. I mean, he can kick out of the stadium. Every touchback is going out of the end zone. He made a 61-yard field goal, or was it 61 or 59, something like that. But he has the leg, without a doubt. But to me, it's the accuracy. I feel like I'm still sweating the 40, 30 even yard field goals. He missed an extra point earlier in the preseason, and it's just the same inconsistencies that just make me nervous and wish that were not present in your kicker spot. Obviously, it's been a few years since we've had a truly reliable kicker. I thought Brett Maher was awesome last year up until obviously the playoff meltdown. I really wish they hadn't given up on him so quickly, just because of the regular season I thought was Pro Bowl caliber for him. So it is what it is, though. Brandon Aubrey is the kicker, at least for now. Obviously, guys like Robbie Gould are out there. I think there's going to be a lot of speculation, especially, if he makes a mistake, if he slips up. So, still lots to be determined there. But for now, Brandon Aubrey is your kicker. Brett Maher's the punter. Long snapper, Trent Sieg. I think that's all pretty locked in. I don't expect to see much of a surprise there. Kick returner, I think Avante Turpin, once again, I think he makes his team. I think he's safe. And special teamer, I think, will be CJ Goodwin. I hope he makes it onto this team. I think he will, as your main gunner and special teamer. So is that just about it? I know I didn't talk about everyone on this team, or if I did, this video would be about an hour long. But if you stayed with me all the way through, thank you so much for watching. Obviously, I'll make another one of these videos post, all these cuts once the dust settles, breakdown. If anything like absolutely insane happens tomorrow, I'll make a quick short so I can get it out to you guys. But thanks so much for watching. It's going to be a crazy day tomorrow. Buckle up. Can't wait. As always, thanks again for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Obviously helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want breaking news, I do have an Instagram account, Cowboys_tracker on Instagram. I can put the link if you'd like, but obviously I'll be keeping up with every roster move on there, so as it happens. So if you'd like some quick up-to-date updates, go ahead and check that out. I'll put the link in the description. So thanks again for watching. Once again, I'll see you guys next time, and go Cowboys.